Hey, how's it going guys? It's Nate here. And Fallout 4 takes place in the relatively vast and open world of 2287 Boston, Massachusetts, now known as the Commonwealth Wasteland. But despite offering quite a large map for players to explore, the game does have some boundaries. Go too far in any direction, and you're bound to find yourself bumping into an invisible wall or some type of barrier meant to contain you in the world that Bethesda actually wants you to experience. However, just because you're not supposed to go beyond a certain point in the game, doesn't necessarily mean that it's totally impossible. And the right combination of console commands and game file tweaking can allow one to break past those barriers and visit areas of the world the developers didn't necessarily expect or want us to. And while most of these out-of-map regions can get pretty boring, largely consisting of poorly textured, flat terrain, there are a few areas past Fallout 4's playable borders that do in fact have some really fascinating things going on. Be it funny Easter eggs by Bethesda, or really weird anomalies nobody would expect. Around a week ago, we took a look at some of the coolest of these details in Skyrim. And now, I think it's high time we do the Commonwealth the same favor. Sit back and relax, as we take a look at 5 of the greatest out-of-map secrets in Fallout 4. We'll begin today's video quite a few miles away from the Commonwealth itself. Instead, we're starting just off the coast of Far Harbor's island of Acadia, made available in Fallout 4's first major DLC. By the way, the Far Harbor expansion is going to make multiple appearances in this video. It might seem odd, but there's just way too much here to pass up. Anyway, while the game allows us to explore the full island of Acadia, from coast to shining coast, Acadia is surrounded by a number of small, lesser islands, many of which are just beyond that pesky invisible wall. Thankfully, we have console commands to get past that. There's nothing special on most of these inaccessible islands really, just lots of oddly placed trees and the like. But on one of these inaccessible islands, located to Acadia's northwest, there's some truly interesting stuff going on. Several fully furnished houses and structures dot this strange place, and the whole area is shockingly well detailed for somewhere we aren't supposed to be able to visit. I mean, there's lootable items, meticulously placed skeletons we should never see, and even individually placed lighting assets. It honestly surprises me why we can't venture out here in normal gameplay. This tiny island is just as well developed as any area on the mainland. But you haven't even seen what I consider to be the coolest part yet. On the westernmost shoreline of this place exists an outhouse. And if opened up, you'll find it's servicing an unlikely client. A garden gnome is hiding in the outhouse. Furthermore, there's another gnome standing in front of some food on a beach chair near the north end of the landmass. So Bethesda even went so far as to make sure this place had a few, possibly evil, garden gnomes on it as well. Again, making it all the more striking why Bethesda barriered this carefully crafted environment off for player access. I guess this is just another one of the DLC's many, many mysteries. Next on our list. Okay, I'm going to kind of cheat here already and take you to a location introduced with the Far Harbor DLC that's not only outside of the playable world map, but isn't even within the map at all. The RJ Angular Test Cell, also known as Clairol Land in the game's files. So again, this place isn't even connected to the world at all. You can't find a doorway leading to it, nor will you eventually run into it if you just sprint far enough off in any direction. The RJ Angular Test Cell exists in its own private world space, only accessible through the use of console commands. And man, is it not a weird region to explore. You see, this was an area built by Bethesda sometime during the development of Far Harbor, and was seemingly used for designing and testing various assets that would eventually find their way into that expansion. When you teleport here, you'll arrive on a small, very circular island, next to a much bigger island overlooked by a lighthouse, with all sorts of strange things on it. There's a couple of I guess you could call them villages, areas covered with buildings. One on the eastern side of the island, and another on the western side. The one on the eastern side is remarkably less crowded, and hilariously filled with all sorts of weird scenes. There's a mole rat with a captain's hat riding on a motorcycle here, there's a couple of bowling pins seemingly getting married or something, and there's skeletons in all sorts of wacky positions. It's absurd. Some of these odd scenes can later be seen in real locations in Far Harbor itself. So it's likely that Bethesda was using Clairol to brainstorm and come up with funny-looking object placements that they would later use some of. Oh, and there's also a lot of evidence to suggest that the devs were specifically testing the concept of making skeletons launch insane distances with explosives. As throughout this section, there's also a ton of landmines creatively hidden beneath bony remains, just waiting for you to trigger them. And then you can watch the entertaining results. The rest of this world space isn't nearly as funny, unfortunately, with it consisting mostly of structures, some in peculiar positions. Though the north side of the island does have a bunch of signs just floating around, and they look kind of cool. There's a lighthouse at the center of the space, and that's kind of neat, but everything else is mostly just some weird looking buildings and boats. Now, one last thing I want to mention is this place's naming. Officially in the game's files, it's referred to as RJ Angular Test Cell, although it has the assigned title Clairol, which is what you'll see it called on the map and on your save screen. Clairol is likely a nod to Bethesda Game Studios' lead environmental artist on Fallout 4, Clara Struthers, who probably had a lot to do in this cell. So, thanks to Clara for giving me an extra 15 minutes worth of exploration in Fallout 4, long after I thought I'd seen everything. Coming in at number 3, it's back to the real world. Well, kind of. We'll specifically be looking at some of the strange things that exist when you escape the boundaries of the game's pre-war world space. Of course, as we all know, Fallout 4 begins with a short sequence back in 2077 America, where you'll spend your first 15 to 20 minutes, rad-free, in one of our only experiences of a world before the bombs fell. The environment is rather controlled and incredibly linear. We're unable to even leave the Sanctuary Hills neighborhood, but by using console commands to escape such confines, some very fascinating anomalies can be found. For one, beyond a sanctuary, it seems Bethesda just sort of painted the game's roads onto the terrain textures, which I guess could give the appearance of roads and a full city from a distance, but up close it's just hilarious. Furthermore, various skyscrapers from downtown Boston are also visible in the pre-war world space, even boasting unique, less eroded models and textures. I personally found this really surprising, seeing as we never actually see these pre-war skyscrapers anyway. They're not visible from any angle in the playable pre-war world space, but Bethesda still thought to place them here with cleaner textures. Why? My best guess is that maybe they thought the buildings would be visible after we climbed that small hill where Vault 111's entrance is located. But even then, the downtown skyline is just too well concealed by trees and too far in the distance. Whatever the reason behind these unique models and textures is, we may never know. But it is nice to know that they're here. For a fourth spot, in downtown Boston, just across the street from the Shamrock Tap House, there exists a large, unenterable skyscraper. Okay, so what's the big deal though? There's lots of abandoned, blocked off buildings in Boston. Well, the thing about this one is that it actually does have an interior we can visit. It's just not accessible without the help of console commands. Referred to as Z Unused Financial 23 in the game's files, the inside of this skyscraper very much exists, and is surprisingly well made. For the most part, the area feels like a normal Fallout 4 dungeon, populated by a small band of raiders, with a few interesting quirks. For one, this place is obviously unfinished. Glaring mesh issues and strange lighting and LODs on the outside of the world we can see from the windows can become tremendously distracting. Furthermore, there's an elevator that was likely supposed to function as the entrance/exit to this place, but when it's used, it just takes players down to a laughably underdeveloped ground floor. Considering all of this information, and the fact that the game's files literally refer to this place as unused financial 23, suggests that it's all just cut content. A piece of the game Bethesda just didn't finish, either due to time or some other decision. Further digging reveals that this place would have been titled The Atlantic Offices on your map. And this is all just speculation on my end, but it seems that the raiders living here were actually in the midst of repainting the place. So maybe we could have gotten some unique dialogue out of them, or a fun little quest out of the whole thing, had Bethesda finished this region. Hey, it's never too late though. Maybe we'll eventually see this place added in by the Creation Club or Atom Shop. Kidding, I know, don't give ZeniMax any ideas. And finally, last on our list, we'll be wrapping this video up right where it began, back at Far Harbor. Specifically, at the far southeastern edges of the playable world space. Here, literally just a couple of yards beyond the invisible wall, is a very odd scene. Thanks to console commands, we can go over and get a better look. Here will be a downed Vertibird, and next to it, a full set of T-45 power armor. Additionally, all throughout the area will be a number of scattered fusion cores, which is really helpful, as well as a couple crates containing some leveled loot. Assuming you're able to access it, this is actually a pretty cool jackpot. And if you're really ambitious, you could hop in that suit of power armor and walk it all the way back to land. But what's the story here? Well, honestly, it probably doesn't require a whole lot of context. This is almost certainly a simple crash site. A Vertibird was flying in the region of Maine, and likely around the time the bombs fell, the bird went down too. However, it is worth noting that Zeke, one of the members of the Atom Cats faction back on the Commonwealth itself, does tell a story where he claims to have once fixed up a Vertibird and flew it around in the sea before accidentally crashing it somewhere. Many players believe that this Vertibird may have originally belonged to Zeke. Hey guys, Nate from the future here. So I was looking back at the editor footage, and you can actually see a skeleton in full-on military fatigues when you're at this location, suggesting it almost certainly crashed pre-war, and therefore probably isn't Zeke's. Okay, just wanted to get that out there. Moving on. Whatever really happened here, I guess only Todd Howard knows, and Todd Howard isn't talking. And with that, we are going to wrap up 5 out of the map secrets in Fallout 4. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Which of these beyond boundary details caught your attention the most? And do you know any similar off-camera facts or secretive developer rooms? Leave a comment down below. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Seriously, oh my golly, like ratings and subscriptions do wonders for the algorithm. But with that said, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.